We've all been told that debt is a problem to be solved. So why is there more government debt now than at any point in human history? The truth is, paying it all off isn't just difficult, it's actively undesirable. Think about what that really means for a second. A government isn't like a family with a credit card bill. When a country borrows money, it's creating an asset for someone else. That debt is a bond, a safe investment held by pension funds and ordinary citizens. Eliminating all public debt would mean destroying those safe assets. And that would cause a financial crisis far worse than the debt itself. Look, the entire modern economy is built on this promise. Banks need government bonds to function properly every single day. It's the bedrock of the global financial system, honestly. So the goal was never to reach zero. Instead, governments just need to manage the growth. They need to ensure debt doesn't grow faster than the economy's ability to handle it. But here's a curious thing. What if the economy itself needs the debt to grow? You see, government spending fueled by borrowing puts money into circulation. That money pays salaries, funds projects, and drives demand. Without that constant injection, could the economy just stall? Now, consider who the government actually owes this money to. A huge chunk is owed to its own agencies and central bank. It's like owing money to your left pocket, which changes the entire equation. Then there's the role of inflation, which is the secret silent partner in all of this. Inflation slowly erodes the real value of the money that was borrowed. A dollar repaid in 20 years is worth far less than the dollar borrowed today. So from a state's perspective, is this really such a bad deal? They get to build infrastructure and fund programs with today's valuable money. They repay it later with cheaper, less valuable currency. That's a powerful incentive not to rush. But wait, what about all the warnings of a coming debt collapse? Those warnings have been a constant for decades, yet the collapse never arrives. Why does the doomsday clock never seem to strike midnight? It's because countries that control their own currency can't run out of it. They can always create more money to service their debts. That doesn't mean there aren't consequences, of course. Creating too much money leads to that inflation we just talked about. It's a balancing act, not a blank check. So the real limit isn't running out of money, it's losing the trust of the markets. And trust is a much fuzzier, more psychological constraint. Do you see how the game changes when you understand this? The debate shifts from paying off debt to managing stability. And stability often means keeping the debt on the books, forever rolling it over. Honestly, a government declaring it will pay off all debt would send shockwaves. Investors would panic, wondering where to put their safe money. Interest rates would go haywire. It would be an act of self-sabotage. So we're left with a system that requires perpetual debt. It's not a bug of the system, it's the core feature. Now, let's pause on a crucial distinction that most people miss. There's a world of difference between a government's debt and a government's deficit. The deficit is just the new borrowing they do this year. The debt is the total pile from all the years before. Paying off the debt would require not just a zero deficit, but a massive surplus. And to run a surplus, the government has to tax more than it spends. You know what that does? It pulls more money out of the economy than it puts in. That's a recipe for a severe recession, which ironically makes the debt harder to manage. So the political pain of doing that is immense. Have you ever wondered why politicians who campaign on debt reduction never actually achieve it? Once in office, they quickly face the economic reality we just outlined. Cutting spending deeply or raising taxes enough to create a surplus is politically toxic. It would mean cutting popular programs or angering taxpayers right before an election. So, the path of least resistance is always to keep borrowing. But let's be clear, this isn't necessarily a story of corruption or incompetence. It's a story of incentives, and the incentives are powerfully aligned against paying down the principal. Think about the last time you heard a world leader give a speech solely about creating a budget surplus. It's rare because it's not a winning message. Growth, jobs, and national security are, and debt funds all of those. Here's another layer to this. The concept of financial repression. It's a dry term for something quite simple. Governments can keep their own borrowing costs artificially low. They do this through central bank policies and regulations that encourage domestic buyers to hold their bonds. This quietly transfers wealth from savers to the state over time. So the interest burden, which is the real cost of debt, stays manageable. Does that sound sustainable? For a very long time, and for a major economic power, it can be. The system is maintained as long as confidence in the government's promise to pay remains. But what happens when confidence starts to waver? That's when you see interest rates spike, as lenders demand a higher return for the perceived risk. We've seen it happen in smaller economies that don't control a reserve currency. They can indeed face a true debt crisis and be forced into brutal austerity. So why doesn't this happen to the United States or Japan? Look at the US dollar's unique role as the world's primary reserve currency. Global trade and finance are denominated in dollars, creating an endless external demand for US debt. This is an extraordinary privilege not afforded to most countries. The world, in a way, is forced to fund America's borrowing. Japan, on the other hand, owes almost all of its massive debt to its own citizens. It's a closed loop with incredibly loyal domestic buyers. The risk profile there is completely different. Now, consider the historical perspective. Britain has carried a significant public debt since the Napoleonic Wars. They didn't pay it off, they just grew their economy and inflated it away over 2 centuries. The debt became a shrinking percentage of a growing pie. That's the historical playbook, not some grand repayment. So is this a perpetual motion machine? Can it just go on forever? Not necessarily, but the endpoint isn't a dramatic repayment. The risk is a slow erosion of faith or a shift in the global monetary order. The real danger isn't the debt number itself. It's when the cost of servicing that debt starts to crowd out everything else a government wants to do. When too much of the budget goes just to paying interest, choices become brutal. But honestly, for now, the markets are telling us they're still willing to play the game. They keep buying the bonds at auctions every single week. That's the only vote that truly matters in this entire equation. So if the markets are still buying, what's the urgency we always hear about? A lot of that urgency comes from misunderstanding what the debt actually represents. It's not a marker of impending doom. It's a ledger of promises made. Those promises are for future roads, pensions, and national defense. Now think about the sheer scale of the obligations that aren't even on the books. Unfunded liabilities for programs like Social Security dwarf the official debt number. The published debt is just the tip of a much, much larger iceberg. This changes the conversation completely, doesn't it? Paying off the official debt would be a symbolic act while ignoring the massive promises underneath. And those promises are politically untouchable. So the system is designed for permanence, not closure. You see, a country's debt is essentially the financial representation of its societal choices. We want things now, and we push the cost into the future. That future eventually becomes the present, and we push it again. It's a rolling consensus, a collective decision to defer. But can this go on for our grandchildren? That's the moral question at the heart of the economic one. The answer, in practice, is that each generation makes its own bargain. They inherit the debt, but they also inherit the infrastructure and bonds. It's a package deal, not a standalone burden. Look at what happens during a major crisis, like a war or a pandemic. Suddenly, concerns about debt levels vanish and borrowing soars to meet the moment. This tells you the true priority, survival and stability in the present. Debt is the tool that allows for that immediate response. After the crisis passes, the new, higher level of debt becomes the normal baseline. The goalposts move, permanently. We never go back. We just start the clock again from a new number. Honestly, that's the pattern of the last century. So what would force a real change? It wouldn't be a political decision to pay it off. It would be a fundamental shift in the global financial architecture. If the world moved away from the dollar as its reserve currency, for instance, that would remove America's extraordinary borrowing privilege overnight. But that kind of shift happens over decades, not in a single budget cycle. For now, the machinery keeps humming. Governments issue new bonds to pay off the old ones as they come due. It's a constant refinancing operation, like replacing the planks on a ship while it sails. The ship never docks for a full overhaul. And you know what? Most people on board don't even feel it moving. They just feel the stability or the lack of it in their daily lives. That's the ultimate test. So when you hear about the national debt, don't imagine a credit card bill. Imagine the foundational wiring of the entire economic house. Turning off the power to fix the wiring isn't an option while everyone's living inside. The system is built to be maintained, not powered down. And that's why governments never pay off their debt. They simply manage its existence in perpetuity. It's the permanent shadow of the state, growing and shrinking with the times, but never disappearing.